Sit right down and I'll show you where my dreams began.
I'm Michael Dugan, your culinary host, guiding you through the chef's journey. Join me at the chef's table, where you'll experience stories, secret sauces, signature dishes, and kitchen disasters. My next guest was born on Vancouver Island, which is about 60 miles west of Vancouver, Canada. She now lives on Camino Island, which is about an hour and a half north and west of Seattle, Washington. Her love for food was always there, but became her focus again when she was diagnosed with multiple chronic and autoimmune illnesses, including celiac disease. Her goal is to create nourishing food using seasonal local ingredients that just happen to be gluten, dairy, and refined, sugar-free, and allergen-friendly. Please welcome to our show, Kimberley Pearson of RocksNDirt Bakery.
Thanks so much, Michael. Really nice to be here.
You know, this episode is actually dedicated to my Aunt Nancy.
Oh, I love that.
Struggle with celiac disease, but she doesn't struggle. She's such a positive force. One of my favorite people in the world. Yes, I'm really excited to talk to you about this and what it was like growing up in their family and how were they originally connected to food. And I know you have a great story to share there.
Yeah. So really my earliest memories in the kitchen, baking alongside my mom and my grandma, my older sisters. Everything was baked from scratch, including bread. We never had store-bought bread. So everything that my mom made, from pies to savory souffles, and a lot of the food that we made, the recipes were family recipes that originated in the British Isles, especially in Scotland, where my family is from.
Wow.
So from a very young age, around 6 or 7, I could make our family's Scottish shortbread, pie dough, different Canadian classics, butter tarts, chocolate haystacks, with assistance. But from a young age, I was cranking out the baking. I've had a really strong connection to food from a young age. And my dad was avid fisherman and also a bush pilot.
Oh my gosh.
Fish that we ate was either what my dad caught or his friends had caught, whether it was king salmon or halibut. And so, what was cool is as a kid, I witnessed my dad. He would make prepare salmon, cook salmon the way that the First Nations people that prepared it. So he would dig a pit in the sand. This is spent much of my childhood in Hornby Island.
That's pretty cool.
Off the coast of Vancouver Island. And so he'd cook it in that pit on rocks, and he smoked his own salmon according to recipes that his friends who were First Nations had shared with him. So it was just this real connection to food, and also food that was intrinsically Vancouver Island and West Coast. And and having also aunties who were foragers. We go foraging for nettles, and then we'd make things out of nettles. And
oh my gosh, I've heard about nettle soup.
Yeah.
That's something somebody told me about one time, but I've never foraged for nettles. Mushrooms.
You definitely need good gloves for nettles. Otherwise, you'll be regretting it.
Okay.
When I tell people I used to go with my dad and we'd fly into, in his float plane. He was a businessman. He would fly people as well, kind of on this. His work was that as a businessman is that he would go to remote communities some that were only accessible by float plane or boat to bring them necessary goods or different companies that he worked with. I'd go with him. We'd go with him, or we would fly into remote areas. Sometimes he loved the Caribou Chilcotin region of British Columbia, in a little bit in the interior, and we'd fly in there up to Anaheim Lake and go fishing, basically kind of almost like off the pontoons of the float plane. We go fishing for, Dolly Varden trout. And he would always say, okay, stay right on the beach. and this is usually it was like, I think me and my brother went with him. He's like, because this is grizzly country and you need to be hyper aware of, so
Wow.
we'd be like, oh, and we frying, pan frying up some trout on the beach there before we flew back out. And like, okay, am I going to have a big, boar grizzly approaching me from the rear or so, yeah. So it was really cool. And we got to,
Oh my gosh.
because my dad had such great love um, for the First Nations people and the cultures, and he knew so many of these. He knew,
Okay.
different chiefs and tribal elders, and they knew my dad and had great relationships with them.
Wow.
And so it was just really cool to visit these communities, and that he just loved going and being able to bring them what they needed. And it was just that deep affection that he had for the people. It was really cool.
That's really awesome. And it reminds me of something. I had an episode that I recorded a while back, and we do a food talk show on Clubhouse, which is an audio only app. And the very first one was a chef that I was really wanting to interview and so excited about. Her name was Andrea Murdoch, and she's out of Colorado, and
Cool.
she's an Indigenous chef, and she cooks Indigenous food. And she's an
Oh,
advocate
that's
for
awesome.
Indigenous people. And it just reminded me of that. So if you're
Okay.
listening, check out
I
Andrea
will. I would
Murdoch's
love
episode, because
that.
it's epic for anyone, you and for anyone that's listening, because her story is incredible. She was like a
Wow.
TEDx Mile High speaker and a chef. And she's this incredible advocate. And yeah,
Wow.
she just does amazing things. And she created an awareness for me
Mm.
of the struggles of Indigenous people. So I really resonate with our conversation. I just wanted to share that with you and everyone.
Oh, yeah. I will definitely check that out.
It's something. But this is so interesting. Oh my gosh, this is the thing I love about podcasting is the people that I meet and the stories that they have. They need to be told, and like I was telling you, just enjoy the journey, because we get to learn about you and you get to walk
Yeah.
a little bit through your life, in this conversation. So tell me a little bit more about, like, as you were growing up, we kind of have an idea now how you're connected to the land, how you're connected to food, and what happened as you were going through, teenage years and
Kind of trying to decide what I wanted to go to school for. And um, uh, so I ended up, I had a great passion for language. So I studied language. Um, and so to this day, I speak a number of languages. So I love languages and culture and people. So I was like thinking about that, but then I ended up that strong love of food, and it kind of an opportunity arose that for me to apprentice as a
Mhm.
chef, and actually in my hometown. And I was like, yeah,
Wow.
I've really been thinking about this, and with the goal of being hopefully a pastry chef. So
I know you're not in it anymore. So let's talk about it for other people to understand. Why
yeah.
do you want to go down this path? I mean, the show is about chefs, but if you decide you want to go down this path, do it right and do it with your eyes open.
So I remember coming home from school, culinary school, every day, and I would just be bawling.
Hmm.
The instructors, a lot of them demanded perfection, and here you're just learning. And then I found, at least for me, it was incredibly competitive, kind of a bit cutthroat.
Hmm.
And I was like, this is not me. I
Yeah.
can't, if this is, you know what I mean? And then back in the kitchen as I was apprenticing, wow, if you made a little error, I mean, you just got, whether you got chewed out by the line cook or or the chef.
But that's the environment of the restaurant business.
It really is.
I don't know about the pastry side. I believe it's a little bit like that, but it's very much as a cook,
Yes.
as a line cook, as a grill cook, as a chef, as a sous chef. It's brutal and it's tough. And some people really love it, and other people get into it and they're like,
Yeah.
I don't know. What am I going to do? We're going to move through this story because you're doing amazing things.
Away so much from my culinary background, my education and the apprenticeship. And I took that with me, and that the skills that I learned, the knowledge that I acquired has really, pushed me forward to where I'm at now, but kind of how I got started in the culinary world. And then I went back to school for teaching, and I ended up teaching both in my native Canada, and then I actually ended up moving to Estonia in what used to be part of the Soviet Union in Northern Europe along the Baltic.
Yeah.
I actually had lived in Sweden when I was kind of in my late teens and early 20s. So, yeah,
Oh
so
my gosh.
that also shaped my culinary journey too, which I can talk about.
Definitely. Yeah.
Taught in Estonia, and I taught 4 and 5 year olds at an international school. And I always made, throughout my whole teaching career, I made part of the curriculum teaching the kids the culinary world. So baking and cooking. And that was, for many of
Okay.
them, it was their favorite. It was their favorite part of the week. It was like, oh, what are we going to create? And yeah, so that was wonderful.
That's cool. Wow.
So I taught, and then I came back to Canada, and I ended up moving out to the East Coast to Toronto, Ontario. Toronto for the non-Canadians, or
Okay. Like me.
yeah. I mean, and so I taught
Yeah.
in a wonderfully diverse school, and kids from just so many, they were first generation Canadians, and some were born, outside of Canada. So it was just really rich and diverse. And I started actually learning Chinese to help one of our students then. So that got
Oh,
started. But yeah, so I came back, started teaching, and then ended up getting married. And I ended up moving to Michigan, where my husband is from. Because of some circumstances, I need to change my my occupation again. And so I got into
okay.
healthcare and working for a local healthcare system, a hospital, and did a bunch of coursework for that. And then, so that's what I did, and up until a certain point. And then my health brought me back to the culinary world, and that first love that I
Yeah.
had was actually, my health brought me back to the culinary world again, I guess.
And that's like a defining moment in your life, I think.
Yeah, it's kind of brought me to where I am now.
So because of your health and what was going on there,
Mm.
you pivoted. And what did you do then?
We had moved back out west. So we moved to Washington State, where I
Okay.
am now. My husband got work out here, and my health really took a major dive. And basically, my doctor at the time, she's like, "Yeah, you need to make some
Okay.
huge changes. You're going to be hospitalized, so you need to change, and you need to not work a traditional job. You need to think about things that you love doing and what you have a passion for, and go in that direction." Got me thinking again, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to work with doing what I love and what I have a passion for. And that was, again, brought me back to food. And so I started developing recipes that were, allergen friendly, gluten-free, dairy-free, refined sugar-free, many egg-free, all kinds of different things. And so it kind of got me started again. And I wanted to recreate so many of those
Hmm.
family recipes. And even some of the recipes that I learned, like I said, I lived in Sweden when I was younger, and the family that I lived with, they were foragers. We used to forage for, wild blueberries, mushrooms. I'd go out with the dad, and we'd put
Oh,
out nets, and he and I, because his kids weren't interested in all these things, and I was totally interested. So I was like his second daughter, and he was just so excited that I loved. I mean, I love being outdoors, and
and then you're kind of moving in this direction,
yeah,
it sounds like, of cooking healthy and really
yeah,
thinking differently. And
yeah.
then and that pushed you in a direction with your career, it sounds like.
It did. It kind of, and also I took all those things from my growing up, also my living in Sweden, and that whole idea of eating seasonally, making food from what was available. I mean, my mom. I mean, that's
Right.
how my mom cooked, is what was available seasonally. And I mean, most kids weren't eating, turnips and rutabaga and things like that. That I grew up, that those were staples. My mom made an incredible savory souffle that was a turnip souffle. I mean, like,
That sounds amazing. I love
I
turnips.
do too. But so kind of that really had me thinking. And then I did read some pretty incredible books like the 100-Mile Diet, and it got me really focusing like what's available locally, what's available seasonally, kind of been on my radar, and I've really
Hmm.
kind of gone in that direction. And I have a modest garden, and my focus on what the recipes that I created became more and more seasonally based, more and more, okay, what's available, what can I create out of this, whether it be savory or sweet or yeah, it was just kind of organically just kind of happened.
Yeah, that's really cool. And then you started a business?
Well, I started a blog.
Okay.
I started a blog to share my recipes,
Hmm.
and to help others who were dealing with multiple, whether it be food allergies or celiac disease or health challenges where they had to eat a certain way and had to alter the way that they ate, which I had to do. I had to make some huge changes. It probably started in 2007, and so I had to eliminate a number of things out of my diet
Hmm.
that were affecting me. And I'm like, well, this is something I can control, so let's work with that and eliminate these things that were making me feel just awful, gluten aside. So I wanted to, yeah, document that and share that. Still working on cookbooks, and I've started doing some teaching, and
Wow.
got me thinking like I need to really document this and share this, and collaborate with different companies, and which is exciting because they're like, hey, if it's a company that I believe in, or that it offers, they create something that I can actually eat, then I'm like, wow, I'm really excited. What can I? They like me to create a recipe for them using this flour or this product, and so it's pretty exciting to just from scratch, like just get the creative juices flowing, and okay, what could I make from this?
That's amazing. I was looking at some of the information you shared with me. So you have this apple scone with
Yeah.
Bordeaux Blanc California grape nectar glaze. I mean, oh wow. And the photograph.
That's so sweet because I'm not a photographer. I've just kind of had to learn and teach, and it's like my a good friend out in Toronto. She's like, because I always want to oh, that isn't a great photo, and she's like, no, she said, you make all of your food look so appealing, and she said that, and that's the goal. She said it doesn't.
You
And so
do.
that's kind of
You
my
do.
goal, and
Of
um
course.
yeah, and I should say, like, you asked about the blog, and it's called the RocksNDirt Bakery, and which is kind of a, you know, people, I think sometimes when I tell them, they're like, what? Like, I could have named it like Kim, because I also go by Kimmy. My dad always called me Kimmy, and a lot of my good friends call me Kimmy. So it's either Kimberly or Kimmy.
Okay.
I could have called it Kimberly's Gluten-Free Kitchen or something like that. But I'm like,
Okay.
no, I really want to be authentic. So the Rocks and Dirt Bakery. So this is actually a term that my brother-in-law, so one of my older sisters, her husband coined. So being from Vancouver Island, it's kind of culturally, you're often brought up in more of a earthy kind of, I would say, hippie-ish kind of way of thinking. Like, it's because it's very much, I mean, that's just how it is, on Vancouver Island and on all the different Gulf
Hmm.
islands. And it's just more kind of granola-y, kind of earthy. And so my sisters and I always were trying to like make healthier versions of this or that, using, alternative flours and different sweeteners. And so I did that for years. But so my brother-in-law, he used to, because we were always doing that, he's like, okay, wait, so is this Rocks and Dirt, for example, Rocks and Dirt shortbread cookies, or is this traditional?
Hmm.
So the Rocks and Dirt is like, how sometimes stuff that's healthy can literally taste like sawdust.
Yeah.
Yeah, these
Yeah.
cookies are made, with this, kind of sugar and this kind of flour, which is non-traditional, and it can be, you know, taste pretty rough. And so Rocks and Dirt is kind of a homage to kind of the sort of healthier versions of things that
Okay.
he refers to as Rocks and Dirt. Like, are they your healthier hippie-ish kind of is it shortbread, or are they traditional, made with, white flour and white sugar? And so he actually coined the rocks and dirt. And so it kind of became a family kind of term. Can you rocks and dirt this recipe of mine? I've got this recipe for scones. Can you rocks and dirt that? And so that means me
Oh, I see.
using entirely alternative ingredients to make them healthier, and also that, you know I could eat and other people could eat. It's So that's what it comes from, and it's very much kind of goes back also to my upbringing and my roots. And also, if you look at my logo, it's actually it's a arbutus tree, which in America, here in Washington State, they call madrona, but in Canada we call them arbutus trees. And that's actually my favorite tree.
Okay.
And it's coming out of a pie, and it's the RocksNDirt Bakery, rooted in the Pacific Northwest. If that makes sense, kind of where that
I love
RocksNDirt
it.
Bakery. And yeah, I thought it was kind of humorous. So people that get it, they're like, someone on Instagram, she's in the UK. She's in outside London, and she just sent me a message once. She said, "You know what? I absolutely love the name of your bakery, or your blog and your Instagram." And I said, "Oh," she goes, "I'm actually
Okay.
from Victoria on Vancouver Island, and it reminds me of home." So it was kind of cool. Not everybody's going to get it, but I wanted to be true to myself and also just true to my roots. And so I'm like, no, I'm gonna call it the RocksNDirt Bakery. I kind of polled people, and they're like, "Oh, it should be this," and other people are like, "No, you need to be
Okay.
authentic." And people that get it, get it.
So what do you find most rewarding about this kind of work?
Most rewarding is being able to, one, create food that I can enjoy, that I don't have to worry about that it's going to have this health impact on me, but also food that people that don't have to avoid all these things, that they can say, "Hey, this is not, oh, this is good for gluten-free. This is just good, really good." It's like, just
Mhm.
recently I just started teaching gluten-free sourdough and doing some Zoom classes. And I had a student in Nashville, and no one has to eat a gluten-free, but she has a best friend who's celiac. And she said, "I want to learn how to make these breads like focaccia
Yep.
uh, for her." And so she made it, and her teenage sons, who do not have to avoid gluten, she made it was still a little bit warm, but it was ready to, eat. So her two sons, she said, those boys busted into that and they devoured it. It wasn't like, "Oh, this is gluten-free bread." No, it was like, "This is just good bread." And then her friend and her children tried the focaccia that she made for them, and they were so happy to actually be able to enjoy real bread again. And she said they were blown away. So it was like, it was just awesome to be able to create food that other people who who can't eat certain things like me, that they can enjoy and love, and that people in their family who don't have to avoid certain allergens or certain foods, that they eat too and go, "Oh, this is just good."
Yeah, that's pretty incredible.
I don't use any ingredients in my kitchen that aren't gluten free. So my husband eats anything I make for people is 100% gluten free, whether they
Okay.
have to avoid it or not.
Aligned with that, do you have any advice for someone that's newly diagnosed with celiac disease who's just starting to navigate this gluten-free cooking and dining journey?
Go to my blog, the RocksNDirt Bakery, and you can find hundreds of recipes. No, just kidding. But
Oh
seriously, I
yeah.
mean, not kidding. But rather than looking, so you've been diagnosed with celiac disease, or you're diagnosed as NCGS, non-celiac gluten sensitivity or intolerance. Don't look at what you can no longer eat.
Mm-hmm.
Look at what you can eat. Don't focus on what you can eat. And the door will just fly open as to all kinds of foods that you can discover. That it doesn't have to be limiting. And I would also say, learn how to cook. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, but just learn how to cook, because it's really interesting, because this is a pre-pandemic statistic. And it was the statistic was that the cost of for a celiac in, I believe it was North America, was of food, so groceries, was 192% more expensive as a celiac versus non-celiac food costs, 192% more expensive. So nowadays there's tons of packaged gluten-free, celiac safe foods, and it's totally fine. But if you're relying on that as your meals, not only is it economically, astronomically expensive, but also the nourishment that you're not going to be getting, and it's just or enjoyment. So I would just say, learn how to cook, and also look at what you can eat, not what you can't eat.
So are you going to be offering any of these classes coming up? Tell us a little bit about that.
For Zoom, I'm kind of offering it on, because I'm working with different availability of people in different time zones. I'm doing on a one-on-one basis and trying to, I've been kind of putting it out there on Instagram,
Okay.
and on Facebook a little. I need to do it a little bit more, but kind of putting it out there. And so people, if they're interested in starting that gluten-free sourdough journey, to get in touch with me, and we can start with a really brief Zoom class that just gets them started creating a sourdough starter. And then we do the first class, which is learning how to make gluten-free focaccia.
Wow.
Also I teach them also to make crackers in that same class.
Okay. I love it.
I will, on a case-to-case basis, do local as well, to the greater Puget Sound or, Camino Island. So it just depends on the situation. So yeah, but primarily I'm starting that on Zoom. So people just need to reach out to me on my Facebook or email. Or
there you have it. It has an amazing blog. It has some incredible pictures of dishes that just make you just really, really well done. I really felt connected to it. So I would definitely go out and check it out. As we wrap up, how do we find you?
So you can find me. My email is the RocksNDirt Bakery @gmail.com. Actually, more important is my website is what I meant to say is the RocksNDirt Bakery .com. Or I also have Facebook and Instagram, both titled the RocksNDirt Bakery. I do have Threads as well, the same name. But yeah, primarily I would say Instagram or Facebook or my website. I will be having a section on my website regarding, the gluten-free sourdough classes.
Great. And just so everyone knows, her website's beautiful. Kimberly, thank you for being a guest on our show. You are truly a voice for chefs, but not only that, you are a voice for healthy cooking, and we really appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Michael. It's been a tremendous honor to be included on your podcast. Thank you so, so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for joining us today. Follow us on Facebook. Find our website in the show notes. Subscribe on Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you listen. Leave a comment with 5 stars, and stay tuned for the next episode of Voice for Chefs.